Welcome back, everyone. I'm Carrington-Russell, Australian award-winning author of contemporary romance and kick-butt heroines and dark fantasy worlds. And I have a very special guest for you today. We are talking to international best-selling author who's known for her dark and steamy romance, including series such as Monsters and Muses and Sweet Surrender. We are talking to the one and only Sav R. Miller. How are you today?
I'm doing great, and thank you so much for inviting me and having me today.
Thank you so much for coming on because you are author goals. Hashtag. We're going to make that
Oh.
a hashtag here. And I am just so excited to delve into where it all began and seeing the progress as to how you got to where you are now. So, what got you into writing and publishing, and how did you find it for the first time?
So I've been writing in general since I was like 8 years old, and I did it for that age old, awkward kid who didn't know how to, make friends in a new school, decided to make her own friends literally on, paper. And so I've been doing that since then, and I went to school and got an English degree. Um, didn't have any actual plans to publish a book, but I knew that one day I wanted to. I just didn't know how I was going to go about it. I didn't have any, plans. I didn't understand the publishing process or the querying process or anything like that. Even though a part of my creative writing capstone was to actually send out like parts of our portfolio to be queried. I still didn't understand any of that though. So I didn't have any plans and I didn't know where I was going with it. And so I was working in HR around the time that COVID hit. And I had just started, until I graduated college, I was reading like exclusively YA books. And then after I graduated college, I realized that I had not really been reading for fun since I had entered undergrad school, and decided that I had a bunch of free time now because no one wanted to hire me where I live. Because there weren't jobs that were like, editing, proofreading, big publishing jobs or anything like that in my area or even remotely close to my area. So I was applying for more, practical stuff like government jobs, communication, stuff like that. So I had a lot of free time on my hands and started reading. I think I switched over with Jennifer L. Armentrout's pen name. I think it's J. Lynn. I started reading because I had read her YA books and I like stumbled upon J. Lynn and realized that there was an entire world of like adult romance and indie romance and all this kind of stuff on the other side. So from like July to December, I burned through over 200 books because I had gone so long not reading anything for like just for me, and I was catching up. So by the time 2020 rolled around and COVID hit and stuff, and I dropped out of grad school because I was in grad school for public administration, which I did not enjoy. I only did it because I was like, okay, I don't have anything else to do. Um, so I went to, yeah, I was in my second semester. I dropped out of that. I got laid off of the HR job that I was doing. And I had all this time on my hands. I had extra time on my hands with COVID. So I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to publish a book myself, I guess, and see, how it goes. So, and here we are.
I want to make a point here too. Like, I love that you said that when you were younger, you started writing because, like, it's very similar. I started writing as an angsty teenager, and I think it's a very common and familiar story for a lot of writers that they just do it originally for themselves and they
Mhm.
find themselves in it in that way of expression as well. I'm curious as to how you found publishing your first book, though, because as you said, it's very different from anything we've done before. So how did you stumble? How did you fall? And how did you boom?
I don't remember how exactly I discovered that you could self-publish with Amazon, but at some point when I think like kind of started getting into the online like Bookstagram community and stuff like that, I guess it had revealed itself to me at some point. The first book that I published is now actually unpublished because it was a completely different like genre, different feel. It was just very I don't want to say obviously the first book that I was publishing, but I after I published it, I took a very different turn, I think, and I went down a different direction. And so I went ahead and unpublished it because it no longer fit in what I was wanting to go forward with. So yeah, it was, an experience. And I know a lot of people, I feel like, start out saying, I published this book. I wasn't expecting anyone to read it. Well, I published my first book and no one read it because I didn't know what I was doing. And I'm glad now that no one read it because it's unpublished and stuff. So I don't have to worry about people being like, oh, where's this book at? I'm just like, no, it doesn't exist. But yeah, it's very, very, very large learning curve. And I'm still learning, as I go forward, like every single day. New information is constantly being released. And I think it's a very good strategy to want to keep learning and want to keep improving so that you're not getting stale and you're not growing.
When you started noticing the snowball effect as to when you notice that you're like, oh, people are actually reading my books. People, I'm a real author. Is this real? When was that moment for you?
A lot of it had to do with TikTok because as a person, I'm very reserved. I'm very introverted. Was not comfortable like in front of a camera. I understand marketing, or I understood marketing to a certain degree, and I understood, I grew up on social media, so I get social media, like, that's my second language basically. So the first series that I published that I was really actively trying to make money off of and was, building a brand with was my King's Trace Antihero series, which is a mafia-esque trilogy set in a small town. And it was dark romance, and it had, when I was just doing the organic stuff with like Instagram and Facebook and like newsletter swaps and stuff like that, it grew enough at that point that I felt like I was making, I don't know, maybe a few $100 like a month on the books. And that felt, like a huge thing because when I published the first book, I wasn't making, hardly anything. So TikTok, everyone started kind of joining it. I think it maybe late 2020. And as I was getting on there and getting involved in book talk and watching other authors promote their stuff and kind of getting a feel for what I wanted my TikTok brand to be, how I wanted to present myself, how I wanted to market my books, it really, really, really helped me, I think, come out of my shell a lot. And it was, I think, after I had published the third book in that trilogy, that summer, I published the third book in that trilogy in March. And then that summer, things started to really pick up with my TikTok. And like, I watched it because I'd gone from like a couple $100 a month, maybe clearing, $1,000, $2,000, and then all of a sudden I was hitting 5 figures with just that trilogy. And I was like, oh my God, like this is more money than I have made in my entire adult life. Like $10,000 on a paycheck was wild. And yeah, and I didn't know, where it was going to go from there. But then where it really, like, kind of like, if you looked at a graph, you would see the gradual uptake, and then all of a sudden it just like catapults into like the stratosphere with Promises and Pomegranates. And I was marketing that on TikTok, but I've had, I think, one viral TikTok the entire time that I've had my TikTok, and it was last summer on the 4th book in this series. So Promises and Pomegranates, when I started teasing that, and I didn't realize when I wrote it what market I was tapping into with the Hades and Persephone, like inspired or retelling or whatever. I had no idea that it even existed because at that point I'd only read like 1 or 2 Hades and Persephone inspired books myself. I knew that I liked Greek mythology, and I thought that the two paralleled really well together. And that was how I wrote it. And it snowballed with the pre-orders. Like I think I tripled pre-orders from the last book in my trilogy. And like a couple, maybe the month after the book release, like it was hitting Barnes and Noble. Like it was crazy and very, very like terrifying, and just the sense of like so much change so fast. And as a Taurus, like, you know, I'm not a person who is really fond of change. But yeah, TikTok for sure, huge tool in changing my like entire career, entire life, all of that stuff. So
What I love about this too, though, is as you said, you are an introvert. So being in front of the camera is something that does not come naturally to you. But I love that you took that plunge and you took yourself out of your comfort zone, and those results really show from themselves. And I think, too, as you said, even though you had only had one TikTok viral, the consistency was there as well. And it's always been a sort of a common conversation now that's happening around the author tables about TikTok and such, and you know what can you do to shine or things like that. But I think it comes down to consistency, but also understanding that if it really is not your thing, that's okay as well. So, but I'm glad that you tried something new, and look what it's built for you. It's incredible. Congratulations.
thank you.
So then tell us a little bit about Monsters and Muses, because one thing that I absolutely adore, just looking from an outside perspective at your success, which is obviously different for everyone, but your branding has always really been on point. And now in this series, you're on to your sixth book, which is just released, which is Liars and Liaisons. So I'd love to talk about that book, but I'd also love to hear about where the inspiration came for the series as well.
The inspiration came, I was asked to do a Mafia Christmas anthology. And I knew that because so far all of the books that I've released, aside from my co-write, um, are in the same universe. So I had a character who kept showing up in the trilogy that I knew eventually I wanted to give a book, because the first book that I ever published, the one that's unpublished now, was going to be a series, and he was going to get a book in that series because his sister was the best friend of the female main lead from the first book. It's a whole convoluted thing. But he was a very strong character for me. And I knew that eventually I wanted to give him a book. And I think at some point, the Mafia anthology Christmas pieces were supposed to be like 10,000 words. And I got the idea to do a little snippet for that that main character, or that male character, and his love interest, because it was, I think, releasing, I want to say that released in 2020, so a few months before I published the last book in that trilogy. So I was like, okay, that'll be good, like, to garner interest for when I do his book. You know, it'll be a nice little piece to segue into a new book or a new series, because at that point I think that I wanted his book to still be a part of the other series. But then as I was creating the characters, they just kept screaming at me. I've always loved Greek mythology, have been super obsessed with it since like 7th grade. And I don't know what I was doing when I was writing the prequel, the anthology piece, but whatever it was led me down a Hades rabbit hole on the internet. And I, you know, was looking at these characteristics and how they described him and stuff. And I was like, okay, this sounds a lot like this character that I'm creating in my head. So then I was like, okay, so what if I did a little spin-off or a little inspiration or whatever of Hades and Persephone, their story, but made it, you know, mafia and modern and bloody. And yeah, it just kind of catapulted from there. And I decided that after I'd written that, he needed his own series. I wanted him to be the start of his own series. I wanted it to be something fresh, something new that I could do that with. And when I was writing the third book in the trilogy, there's a character, the main character has a younger sister, and as I was writing her, the idea for Orpheus and Eurydice just like kept beating me in the back of the head. I was like, okay, because I had this young girl who was like obsessed with this rock star, and it just was falling into place without me even really trying to do anything with it. And so I was like, okay, so then what I'm gonna do is write a series that's just inspired by these different Greek myths. And so I came up with the title for Promises and Pomegranates, and I was like, this is a really good fucking title. And so I had this girl that I knew, Kat, with TRC Designs. She hadn't designed for me yet, but so Promises of Pomegranates was the first I think that she did for me. And she designed the cover, and I was like, holy shit, this cover is like stunning. Like people are gonna lose their minds over it. And they did. And so yeah, the Monsters and Muses series was born really, I mean, it started with that little kernel of Hades and Cal, Elena and Persephone, and then snowballed when I got the cover and the title. And I was like, okay, this I think could really be something interesting, really cool. So I had initially only planned for it to be 3 books. And then as I kept writing more and more, these other characters were like, hey, we also have, things that we would like to tell. So I was like, okay, we'll make it 6 and that's it. I'm cutting it off there. The world is too big. It's too much for me to keep up with. So
I do want to add the consistency of those covers are just they are beautiful, and the titles are very clever. I was even like, as I was reading each one, I was like, damn, these are good titles. Well done.
I yeah, no, I take very, very great pride in the titles because those are completely my babies, my vision. I worked very hard to make them just, I don't know, it's so hard to describe, but like I would just plug and plug and plug until something clicked. And kind of the same with the covers, although after we did Promises and Pomegranates, I mean, we basically had like the template for how I wanted the rest of them to look. And when we did Vipers and Virtuosos, so Promises has the centered object on it with the pomegranate, and then Vipers, you've got the diagonal, the guitar neck. And so when we did Oaths and it was another centered object, I was like, okay, so I like the symmetry of every other cover having that like switch. So yeah, and it was just insane how well they worked. Like I would tell Kat, I would just bring her the myth and the color scheme, and I'd be like, okay, maybe let's, this might be significant, this might be significant. Let's maybe throw this in. I want it to make sense. I want it to look dark. I want it to look romantic,
It's actually going to be one of my questions because I was curious as to how you controlled the creative sort of vision for your books, in the sense that like your fan art, or sorry, not fan art, custom images are just so hot. Like I was scrolling through on your website and I was like, damn. So I'm curious as to, with those as well, do you sort of just describe the scene? Do you let a lot of your artists sort of go more with their creative spark, which you were sort of leaning towards prior about your cover art?
So I'm really picky. I'm picky in general when it comes to the cover art, and I'm picky when it comes to character art. I want it to be as close to perfect as it can possibly be. And it's hard because I don't envision these characters like in my head when I'm writing them. Like they're just kind of like essences that like exist. And when I write, I'm kind of I call it method writing. So I'm, thinking as them. So yeah, I have a hard time envisioning them when I'm writing them. So then I have to go back and like take down all of their descriptions and like especially, oh my god, and I wish I would stop giving my characters tattoos because I always I always give them like really vague like descriptions, and then I have to go back and be like, okay, so what what tattoos do you have? and what do I need to show and where are they at? Like it's it's so involved. Um, but with the character art, yeah, I get very, very specific in the descriptions. I send them pictures from like their Pinterest boards for vibes and for inspiration and stuff like that. There is obviously like a certain degree of, their interpretation and style and stuff like that. So I do, I take that into account also. I like to be involved in that process.
So then, are you a plotter or a pantser?
I am a pantser pretty much through and through. And it's kind of because of the way that I write with that method writing kind of thing, is that I like to experience everything as the characters are experiencing it. So I try to know, the first thing I do is fill out like the super in-depth character profiles for the main characters, for the ones that I will be writing their point of views. And then I will sometimes, and it depends on where I'm at in the writing process, because a lot of the times after I do the character profile, I like to just jump in and like see where they take me. But sometimes I'll do like a super loose, like this random, very vague thing happens in this chapter. And it depends also like how close to a deadline I am too, because the even the general like one sentence, a few words can help me write a lot faster. And so yeah, I want in another life I would be a plotter, because I just know it would make my life so much easier. But I started a new book that's a slightly different genre than I've been writing. And I was talking with one of my editors, and she, we were working out like, so I was like, okay, I'm gonna get on top of things. I'm gonna be plotting all of this entire book. I'm just gonna know what's happening. She's like, yeah, that's probably not gonna work for you. We're gonna do these character outlines. We're gonna learn the characters, and then maybe we can start with like a couple bullet points and just get you on the right track. But yeah, it just doesn't work for me. And I think part of it is because the structure kind of makes me feel a little trapped and like I have to fit, into this parameter. Sometimes also, I'll write a blurb before I've written the book, and then I use that kind of as a plot outline. I think the last few books of the Monsters and Muses series, I kind of did that. And I think that is helpful because it's super vague. And I can stretch it to make it fit the story if I need to. And it doesn't necessarily make me feel like, oh my God, I have to do this, and this, and have to stay on this track in order. But yeah, definitely a pantser.
How long does it usually take you to write a book?
Well, once upon a time, I could write really, really fast. And I could get them done in like a month and a half, and that's not rushing at all. That's just me writing consistently, me feeling the story. Me rushing, I've written, I think, a couple drafts in like a 1 to 2 week period. Very, very, very stressful on the creative process in general. I don't like doing that. So the last book Liars and Liaisons took me, I think, like 6 months to write, because of all of the like strain that I had put on my creative process with the like tight deadline schedules. So yeah, I'm trying not to do that. I'm trying to get back to the comfortable month and a half, 2 months. Yeah. What we're trying.
I think this interesting thing happens too in an author's career. And obviously, this does not apply for everyone because everyone is different. But I notice this in myself, and I notice this in a lot of other authors, is that for the first year or two, you just go crazy. You're writing so much, you're so passionate, you're so excited, you're delving into all of these worlds. And then as soon as you get to around that 1 to 2 year mark, is when you start realizing it's a business. And so
Yep.
when you have to incorporate all those other things, that's when, and because you've been going at such a fast pace and you've been going so hard, you start getting tired as well. And then you need to find a healthy balance. And I think that's where we really struggle at that, like, sort of 2 year mark, figuring out, okay, what is going forward for a long-term career? What is a pace that I can work at? And then you have to rediscover your process all over again. Would you agree with that?
And absolutely. Yep. And I think there's nothing wrong at all with your process changing. Because I think the industry, the career, like it's a constantly changing thing. And I think in order to keep up and in order to not, reach this place where you're completely burnt out and you're not wanting to do anything, I think you have to continually change and adapt and find what works for you for sure.
What advice do you have for authors who are wanting to apply mythology into their books?
I have fun with it. Don't feel like you have to incorporate a certain amount. Don't feel like if you're not doing a true retelling, then it's not, based in mythology or you don't know what you're talking about or whatever else. Like you can the greatest thing about writing and about literature and fiction is that you can literally do whatever you want. So create whatever world you want to create and just enjoy. Make sure that whatever you write and whatever you are making is something that you enjoy and that you would want to read. I
Yeah.
think that's what's most important.
So, one thing I want to talk about is obviously you are an international award winning author and you are an Amazon top 50 bestseller as well, which is incredible. So, again, congratulations. I would love to know what the most sentimental moment for you in your career has been so far. What was that moment that you thought, wow, I'm really here, I've really made it?
So I think I've only cried with one milestone in my career, and it was the first time that I saw um someone, and it wasn't even someone had sent me anything, but it was Promises and Pomegranates sitting on a table at Barnes and Noble. And I think it was in Caroline Peckham and Susan Valenti's Facebook reader group that I was just scrolling past and happened to like pause and see. They weren't even taking it for me. They were taking it because their books were on there. But I saw it and I was like, oh my God, that is my book at a brick and mortar Barnes and Noble. And I'm a self-published, author whose book just released like a month ago. um, and it was crazy because it was a time that like the transition of TikTok really, really ramping up success and stuff and visibility for indie authors. And so it was like at that kind of, I don't want to say the height because obviously it's still going on constantly, but it was like kind of a tipping point, like time period, where people's stuff had just started showing up in brick and mortar stores. And it was so, so crazy to me because like it wasn't something that I was anticipating. I had zero expectations. Like Promises and Pomegranates had hit and was in the top 100 of Amazon store for a while. And so like I was like, okay, this is amazing. But the Barnes and Noble thing really that made me cry. And that was kind of the moment that I was like, okay, this is it. Like this is what this is the dream. This is it.
Did
So
you do something to celebrate that accomplishment?
I did not. I'm not a really big celebratory person. Um, and honestly, like even talking about my accomplishments since publishing, I swear I've changed. Like just I've grown so much since publishing, since starting the journey, and have changed so much. And I used to be someone who was really self-deprecating, and I still am, but I actively I think try not to be because I think a lot I personally attribute a lot of my success to the shift in my mindset and kind of I went from, oh, no one is going to be reading these books. I don't expect anyone to be reading them. I'm not, I'm expecting disappointment to no, these are great things that are, happening for me and I want them to happen to me and they're going to. So yeah, I I don't think I celebrated, but I was definitely something that I would like text my best friend and be like, oh my God, this did you see this picture? Do you see this picture that I'm showing you right now? This is so exciting. But yeah.
I want to touch a little bit on the mental mentality into this because I think it's a conversation that needs to happen more often because there is so much self-doubt, there is so much pressure, and we are so critical on ourselves. And I think a lot of the time we really do get in our own way. So, what conversations were you having with yourselves, or were there particular things that you put into place to shift that mindset to, I'm a fucking superstar and I'm rocking this career? What were the things that you did?
So the first and the almost the only thing that I ever since I decided, hey, this is how I'm going to view myself, my life, my future, it is the one that I have never, ever, ever wavered on was my finances. And it was so crazy because I started gradually shifting. I started doing like daily affirmations and gratitude journals, and I got really into crystals. And I was really, really, really trying. I wanted to make money. I wanted comfort. I wanted stability. I needed it. Um, and so I went from a person who would joke about not having any money or joke about being poor or, share memes and stuff like that. And just in general, I guess like, I don't know, commiserate in financial instability. And I'm not even like, it's not a joke. I'm not exaggerating that the second that I stopped doing that and that I started focusing on, I have money, money is coming to me, blah, blah, blah. It literally, it started changing and it has not changed ever since. Um, so that's the one that I'm like very, very, very adamant about. I anytime I do my affirmations or do my gratitude journals, that is the one thing that I am very steadfast with. And I don't let other people joke about my finances. I don't let them, worry for my finance. Because my mom, like, I bought a new house in May, and she's like, "Oh my God, I don't know, how are you going to be able to afford?" Because it was a bigger house than I had bought last year and all this stuff. I'm just like, you don't worry about like, I'm not in that place anymore. I don't want you to be in that place. Like, I'm good. um, but yeah, that, and I think, I know, people say money does not buy you happiness, and it for sure doesn't, but it definitely provides you a space where you are able to be more comfortable and you can access the happiness that you might not otherwise be able to. And I still struggle so much with self-doubt and what's the I word that
Um,
I'm completely blanking on it.
Imposter syndrome.
Yes, imposter syndrome.
We know this word. We
Yeah.
know.
I struggle with that. I struggle with comparing myself to peers or, newer authors or whoever else that I see, who might be doing better than me in some areas. And, it's hard to even tell because you don't know what's going on in the background. So all you see is surface level stuff. And it's very, I'm not gonna sit here and be like, I'm perfect all of a sudden because I'm definitely not. And it is something that I work on actively. And yeah, I have forgotten, I feel like, why I started talking about it.
I love this. I live for this because like I do all of these things. I
Yeah.
practice and I agree 100% that it makes a difference because, even if it's crystals, girl, I have heaps. I love them. And
Oh
then
my God, yes.
like, hello, soul sister, like affirmation,
Yes.
gratitude. Like, it makes such a difference. And, whether this is your thing, whether you think it's very out there, and that's okay if it is, I think it's a good way to start practicing just to have a little bit of time to yourself to actually reflect on what you want and also being grateful for what you have. Because if you are consistently looking at what you don't have, then it is going to put you in a negative space. So I believe that these practices are really incredible to have. And I love hearing that you found results immediately. That's so nice to hear.
Yeah.
Then what are your top three marketing tips for authors?
Oh, get a friend who understands marketing. Honestly, I attribute so much of my success and so much of where I am today because of my best friend, who is also a super successful author. I got super lucky to meet her at the start of her career and like have kept her in my grip since then. No, but seriously, like finding people who do understand stuff that maybe you don't and that you can talk about with and that you can research stuff and like, bounce ideas off of and stuff like that, and who might push you to step outside of your comfort zone and step outside of your comfort zone. I was not comfortable on TikTok. I hated TikTok at first. I did not want to get it. And my best friend told me, just get over yourself and do it. Like it's not it's not that hard. It's kind of fun, And TikTok was a completely different world from like Twitter and Instagram and everything like that. And consistency, and really, if you focus on, I think, building your community and your fan base, and you really kind of water that garden, so that when you have releases, you have people talking about your stuff, and you have people who immediately want to download it and immediately want to read it and immediately want to go out and buy every single copy that they can buy, ebook, print, audio. And they're telling their friends about it. They're telling, bookstores about it, because a lot of that is how my success, at least initially, and even now, a lot of it's spread from just word of mouth, because like I said, I didn't have any viral TikToks that made promises and pomegranates like skyrocket out of, the stratosphere. It was just a very organic growth, I think, of people talking about it, whether or not they liked it or didn't. And it didn't matter because people were talking about it, and that was, no press, no, there's no such thing as bad press. Totally true. I guess, yeah. That's all I'll say is that, yeah.
You got yourself in. No, I'm kidding. You don't have to answer that. I would love to know what your biggest goal is. What is the big dream that you're chasing for your career?
You know, I I know a lot of people want, like, they want to hit the bestseller lists, they want to be in all the stores, they want publishing deals. And all of that is stuff that I would love to have, and that I put them on my like affirmations and stuff. But my real goal, and that is the consistent goal, is just to constantly just keep growing. That's what I want, is just a steady, or maybe not steady, if it wants to just, take off randomly, I'd be okay with that too. But I just want to keep doing better than I was doing with a previous release or series. Yeah, so my goal is just exponential growth, I guess. I just want to keep cultivating a great fan base that loves my stuff and wants to keep reading it.
Yeah, let's smash it. I believe in it, so let's do it.
Yeah.
I have a segment called Speed Dating with an Author. I've lit a candle, I've created ambience, but basically what it is 5 rapid questions. Are you ready?
Yes.
Amazing. What is the clumsiest moment you've ever had?
Oh, clumsiest moment. I don't know. I like to think that I'm not a super clumsy person because I'm so anxious that I'm always like overthinking. I gotta, put this foot in front of the other and make sure that I've got all my stuff together. I don't know.
What about embarrassing? Let's deep.
Okay, embarrassing. I have plenty of those. Yeah. I've got a lot of vomit stories. Unfortunately, I vomit and I are like best friends. Um, I oh God, so on my 17th birthday, I I got my period. And I get like the worst cramps, the worst PMS symptoms, like just awful, awful, awful. And so I had to go to school on my 17th birthday, and I was also dealing with that. So I think I took way too much Midol, and it made me very, very sick. And so I was like puking on the bus ride home because I did not have a car at that point. So I was like having to get the bus driver to like stop, and I had to sit in the front seat, and I was puking on the side of the road. And I got home, and I think my face had turned so green that I went downstairs at one point when I was finally like feeling decent enough to go downstairs, because I spent the entire birthday like in my bed. And I came downstairs, and my mom was like, "Your face is just green. You look like a ghoul or something." Which I guess I don't know if that's my most embarrassing, but that's the one that comes to mind usually. Um,
Do you know, I relate to this. I'm going to call myself out as well on this. So I get motion sickness at the best of times, and I've had the bus situation as an adult as well. So, and there's nothing more exciting than vomiting on yourself in a bus as an adult, thinking, I'm a full grown woman. Hear me roar. So,
yep, yep.
yeah, done that. I love that. Thank you for the confession.
You're welcome.
What are the three words that best describe you?
I like to think that I'm funny, loyal, and very, very stubborn, I think. I think
Tell me you're a Taurus without telling me you're a Taurus.
yeah, yeah.
What is the song that best describes you?
The song, oh God, I
Perhaps band or singer that might be more to theme.
well, my top like favorite artists are going to be Sleep Token, Chase Atlantic, and maybe Blackbear. Blackbear's music is very pop sounding, but like also it tends to be very like he's very clearly going through it constantly. And I think that probably is very, very on brand for me,
Okay.
because I think growing up with, the society that I did, and like the generation that I grew up in, um, we were a very self-deprecating, very dark humored group of people. And I think that we all got very good at, especially on the internet, masking, very hard, deep emotions with like humor or whatever else. So I think probably Blackbear speaks the most.
Who has been your favorite character to write and why? You can only have one.
I get this question literally all the time. It is the, I think, most popular question, and I never know how to answer it because I love like these are my babies. Like I don't have kids, so these are my full through and through. These are my children. I have given birth to them with my brain. um, and it's very, very hard to pick a favorite, but I don't know. And I have enjoyed writing them all for different reasons, I think. But every time that someone asks me about a favorite, I feel like I go back to Vipers and Virtuosos, and it's always Aiden. And I think it's because he was such a different character from the other male leads that I'd written. Because up to that point, like they're all involved in the mafia, they're all murderers, they're all very violent, they're very, broody in general, but like they have this undercurrent. And Aiden was just a sad little musician. And it was so refreshing and so interesting to write someone who could be completely unhinged or completely like terrible for reasons other than, he's in the mob or he's a murderer or very violent or whatever else. Because Aiden's not violent, like he's very much so a lover, not a fighter. And yeah, it was just such a refreshing, different experience that I think if I absolutely had to pick, I think it would probably be him.
What is a unique talent or skill set that you have that not a lot of people know about?
I don't think I have any. I because before I published, I would have said writing. And now I'm like, well, I don't know if that's, if it's not really a unique skill. Or I don't know if I'm really that good at it anymore. Yeah, I'm, you know what? I'm a pretty good cook. I'll say that. I don't do it often, but I started watching Chopped with my now ex like a few years ago, and I absorbed a lot of like this information from them and have really, really improved my cooking. So I'm gonna go with cooking. I'm a good cook.
I'll be over for dinner then, no problem. I have had so much fun today. Thank you so much for coming on. And most importantly, where do we find you and what's coming out?
I am all over social media. I've got, I think, everything at this point. You can find me on Facebook. I've got a reader group that's Sav Suckers. I'm on Instagram, TikTok, Threads, which is Instagram's new Twitter. I'm still on Twitter. We'll see, how long Twitter survives. Pinterest, yeah, I'm everywhere. I've got my website, which is just savrmiller.com. I'm working on 3 different projects right now. One is a super secret project that is set in the current Monsters and Muses world that I can't talk about at all yet, but I'm very excited for when I'm able to. I announced the spin-off series to the Monsters and Muses books, which is 3 books that follow Cal and Elena from Promises and Pomegranates. Their 3 kids, so they each get a book, and it is each one of the characters are inspired by the Furies of Greek mythology. So their titles of their books are also like they correlate with those. So the first one of those comes out in June, and then I'm also secretly working on a hockey romance that I have not said anything except that I'm working on it. I don't have any like set dates for publishing or anything like that. But I'm very, very, very excited about that one. So
you have so much in the works. I'm so excited to see it all
unfold.
that your readers are too. My goodness. Well, I have had so much fun today. Thank you so much for coming on. And who knows, maybe we'll watch this space, see what you get up to over the next few years, and possibly get you back on.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. Thank you so much for having me. This is fantastic.
Amazing. Thank you. Well, I'm going to love you to leave you. Bye, guys.